In the twilight of Earth's final war, a single act of kindness from an alien species sparked a legacy that would echo across the galaxy. Centuries ago, amidst the burning skies and the fall of New Beijing, Corporal James Rourke lay dying beneath a collapsed arcology. The orbital bombardments from the Dravari Empire had shattered Earth's last bastion of resistance. Smoke and ash filled the sky, the air thick with the stench of melted metal and ozone. James had accepted his fate, alone, forgotten, lost in the rubble of humanity's last stand. But then they came. The Thalzean were a reclusive, insectoid race from the edge of explored space, known more for their art and xenobotanical achievements than warfare. On a diplomatic tour of Sol during the Dravari invasion, they had been ordered by the Union of Core Civilizations to observe, but not intervene. Neutrality, they said, was the only path to galactic peace. Yet something about the broken human soldier moved them. Against protocol, against orders, a Thalzean scouting vessel descended through the ruins and pulled Corporal Rourke from the wreckage. Their medic, Sathari, worked tirelessly to stabilize him, using biotechnology unfamiliar to Terran science. For 3 months he healed in silence aboard the Whispering Seed, surrounded by the hum of strange flora and the gentle click-speak of his unlikely saviors. When he left, he didn't thank them with words. He simply etched a Terran eagle into the hull of their ship with his knife, a crude yet heartfelt gesture, and then he vanished. Years passed. Then decades. Then centuries. The Union had continued, unbothered by the extinction of one species. Earth was marked as a quarantine zone, its remnants erased from stellar charts. The Dravari faded, consumed by internal collapse. The Thalzean returned to their gardens, but they never forgot. Generations later, the Thalzean homeworld of Thalkir was under threat. A splinter faction of the Vagran Dominion, long resentful of the pacifist Thalzean, launched a surprise attack. The Thalzean Council, desperate and untrained in warfare, activated an old beacon, a ceremonial artifact left behind by James Rourke himself, encoded with a forgotten frequency. It was a signal, and across the void, it was heard. The human fleet arrived from the dark edge of space, emerging from folded dimensions like phantoms. No one knew they still existed. No one believed they could survive the purge of Sol, but they had. And they had grown in silence. 200 warships, sleek and brutal, bristling with energy weapons, kinetic railguns, and planetary-class bombardment arrays, emerged in formation above Thalkir's moon. Their hulls bore the ancient eagle, fused now with the Thalzean spiral sigil, a symbol of a bond forged in blood and memory. A voice thundered across the comms, broadcast in every known tongue. You once helped a human, now an entire fleet answers the call. Admiral Elara Rourke, a descendant of James, stood at the helm of the dreadnought EHS Vindicator. Clad in obsidian battle armor lined with silver threading, she gazed at the Thalzean capital through the viewscreen, her jaw tight with purpose. Deploy battle groups. A through C, she ordered. Defensive posture around Thalkir. Any Vagran vessel within 5 clicks is to be disabled, not destroyed. We are not here for conquest. We're here for them. The battle that followed was swift and decisive. Vagran warships, built for intimidation and planetary subjugation, found themselves hopelessly outmatched by human tactical precision and firepower. The Vindicator alone disabled 3 carriers with a single salvo of graviton-tipped torpedoes. Human fighters danced between enemy barrages like phantoms, tearing through cruisers with surgical accuracy. On the ground, human drop troopers deployed, shielding pylons around Thalzean civilian centers, protecting millions from orbital fire. Engineers worked side by side with Thalzean gardeners, retrofitting defense grids using hybrid human-alien tech. The Vagran withdrew within 40 hours. The last enemy vessel blinked out of system space, its commander stunned by what he'd witnessed. The humans had returned, not as victims but as something new, something terrible, something noble. In the aftermath, Thalkir was reborn. Children painted murals of the black ships that blotted out the stars. 1,000 poets wrote songs of the steel garden that bloomed in fire. The council declared a new star cycle, Rourke's Day. As for the humans, they remained in orbit, not for power, not for dominion, but because they had remembered. When asked why they answered the call of a race that had only saved one of their own, Admiral Rourke's answer was simple. We remember loyalty. We repay kindness. And we do not forget who stood with us when the stars turned cold. Across the galaxy, whispers spread, empires stirred, treaties were rewritten, because the humans were back and they did not come alone. They came with allies, with rage, and with a vow. Never again would humanity stand alone in the dark. Never again would betrayal go unanswered. And never again would a friend's call be ignored. They were the forgotten fleet, born of ashes, shaped by memory and forged in silence. And now, they would change everything. The stars beyond Thalkir shone brighter than they had in centuries. In the quiet aftermath of battle, the orbit above the Thalzian world became a sanctuary, not a graveyard. Human engineers worked alongside Thalzian gardeners to repair atmospheric filters, recalibrate orbital reflectors, and cleanse the planet of the vagrant poison that had begun to seep into its oceans. The alliance, once forged by a single act, now pulsed with life. Admiral Ilara Rourke stood in the command center of the Vindicator, flanked by her officers. The holographic table before them projected the layout of Thalkir, but the Admiral's attention remained fixed on a flickering beacon, pulsing faintly in a corner of the system map. That's not a local signal, said Commander Juno Maris, narrowing her eyes. Encrypted pre-purge Terran code. Rourke crossed the room in 3 strides, voice suddenly sharp. Origin? Asteroid field near the Helion drift. Buried in debris. Could be a trap, could be bait. But that code hasn't been used since Sol fell. The Admiral nodded. Send a recon wing, full stealth. I want eyes on whatever that is. If it's human, we bring them home. If it's not, we find out who dared to fake our ghosts. Within an hour, the Spectre squadron of stealth corvettes slipped into fold space, vanishing without a trace. In the meantime, on the surface of Thalkir, something extraordinary unfolded. Children who had once grown up fearing silence and skyfire now raced through fields reinforced by Terran shielding arrays. The Thalzian elders watched in quiet reverence as human medics taught their own physicians to treat neurological scarring caused by vagrant neurotoxins. At the Grand Circle of Thalkir, a council of both races convened. Ilara Rourke, dressed in ceremonial armor laced with starlight thread, stood beside Elder Maishari, whose wings shimmered with bioluminescence. You did not owe us this, the elder said softly. Ilara replied, and yet, you were the only ones who owed us nothing and helped us anyway. That is the kind of debt we choose to repay. Cheers echoed in the chamber. For the first time in remembered history, a pact between insectoid and human was recorded, ratified, and celebrated with the planting of a bioluminescent grove around a shard of the Vindicator's armor, the symbol of unity. Days later, the recon wing returned. Captain Dorn Vela, leader of the Spectre squadron, brought with him grim news. We found a vessel, he said during the briefing. Old hull, pre-purged Terran design, call sign EHS Resolute, minimal power, derelict, but there were survivors. A murmur rippled through the officers. Humans? Rourke asked, her voice barely above, a whisper. Yes, Admiral. About 50 of them. Cryosleep malfunctioned. They've been in stasis since the Exodus. No knowledge of the purge. No idea we survived. They thought we were all gone. The silence in the command deck stretched, long. Then Ilara exhaled slowly. Prepare medbays, notify the council, we're bringing ghosts home. When the Resolute was towed into Thalkir orbit, its hull blackened with age and drifting scarring, the atmosphere aboard the Vindicator shifted. Human officers lined the hangar deck, wearing formal uniforms. A ceremonial honor guard stood, at attention. The cryopods were transferred, revived, and slowly, the lost survivors stepped into a galaxy they no longer recognized. One of them, an elderly man with frostbitten lips and a shaking voice, looked into Admiral Rourke's eyes and whispered, "We failed. We couldn't save Earth." She grasped his hand and answered, "No, but you helped us survive it. And now we'll help you live beyond it." Their arrival sent waves through the fleet. Every corner of the Resistance's network learned of the discovery. Ships that had long been silent responded. Ancient databanks pinged active. One by one, outposts and lost Terran enclaves began reaching out, hearing the signal, responding to the call. What had once been a whisper of hope grew into a storm, but not everyone rejoiced. From the edge of Union-controlled space, eyes watched. The Vagrant Dominion, humiliated and now licking their wounds, plotted revenge. And behind them, the Union, of core civilizations debated in secret chambers, disturbed by the rise of a power they had long thought buried. A decision was made. An emissary was sent. When the Union diplomatic vessel, Radiant Accord, arrived in orbit, its hull gleaming with neutrality codes, it was escorted to the Vindicator under heavy guard. The emissary, a crystalline being named Archilith, stood before Ilara Rourke in a chamber deliberately stripped of flags and symbols. "Admiral Rourke," it began, voice like wind through glass, "the Union acknowledges the actions of your fleet and the liberation of Thalkir. We offer formal recognition and a request for peace." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "Peace? From the same Union that watched Earth burn and did nothing?" Archilith replied, "We chose stability. We feared escalation." "You feared us," she corrected. "And you should." She stepped forward, the weight of centuries in her gaze. "We do not seek war. But if another world cries for help, if another people are hunted, we will answer. Not with silence, not with diplomacy, but with steel." Archilith tilted its head, crystalline layers refracting light. "Then this is your declaration?" Ilara turned and pointed toward the stars. "That is our promise." The emissary departed in silence, carrying back to the Union the message they never wanted to hear. Humanity had returned, not as victims, not as beggars, but as guardians, warriors, and rememberers of debt and dignity. And across the galaxy, oppressed, voices began to whisper that name again. The Forgotten Fleet. The following weeks brought action to the words spoken. Fleets were rearmed, ancient defense stations were recommissioned. Human and Thalzine engineers worked side by side, reviving dormant technologies buried under forgotten moons. The Vindicator became the mobile hub of a new alliance, and from its decks, ambassadors traveled to distant worlds. Some were wary. Others were desperate. The name of Earth meant different things to different peoples, for some a legend, for others a warning. But to all, it became clear. The humans had returned not as conquerors, but as champions of the betrayed. Whispers grew louder when the Terran Union of Free Systems was formally declared. The banner, a stylized phoenix rising from cracked Earth, flew above every liberated station, every embassy, every rebuilt city. The Union of Core Civilizations watched with dread as smaller member races defected, petitioning to join the Terran Union. Each request echoed with quiet condemnation of the old order. Each added another voice to the swelling storm. Then came the first direct challenge. A small moon on the edge of the Vagrant frontier, Ternax 4, sent a distress signal. It was intercepted by the Vindicator. A Vagrant extermination fleet had surrounded the moon, demanding surrender. The inhabitants were Kesteri, feathered avians who had once offered aid to Terran refugees centuries ago, smuggling food through blockade lines. Ilara Rourke stood on the command bridge. "Helm," she said, voice like iron wrapped in velvet. "Set. Course for Ternax 4. Maximum speed, alert all wings, we answer the call." The Battle of Ternax would become legend. 30 Terran and Thalzine vessels arrived against 80 Vagrant warships. Outnumbered nearly 3-1, they fought with unity, precision, and fury. The Vindicator cut through the enemy lines, flanked by fighters piloted by humans and Thalzine in synchronized formation. The skies of Turnax lit with fire and retribution. When the dust cleared, the Vagran flagship had been destroyed, and the surviving invaders fled in panic. The Kastari wept openly when Terran Marines landed and lifted their siege. From that day, worlds that had once hidden in fear began to believe. And the Union, now forced to reckon with a rising storm, moved its fleets. War was not yet declared, but the lines had been drawn. Alara Rourke stood at the heart of it all, gaze fixed on the future, knowing it would be paved in sacrifice. But they would never be forgotten again. Wrath of the Forgotten. The silence of deep space was shattered by the thunderous roar of activated warp drives. The Vindicator, scarred but unyielding, led a flotilla of ships under the banner of the Terran Union of Free Systems. Behind it followed a new era, not of conquest but of reckoning. The time of appeasement had ended. War was no longer a specter in the shadows. It was real, and it was coming fast. Word of the battle at Turnax IV had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. For some, it was hope rekindled. For others, it was a clarion call to arms. The Vagran Dominion, having suffered another public defeat, screamed for vengeance in their assembly halls. Their high warlords denounced the Terran resurgence as an existential threat. In secret war rooms, they plotted an offensive to end humanity once and for all. The core worlds of the Union watched, with growing unease. Debates flared within their once stable alliance. Member species that had long lived in fear of the Dominion now saw in humanity a glimmer of resistance they dared not show on their own. When Alara Rourke spoke, her voice echoed through the hidden corners of political chambers like prophecy. We do not fight to reclaim Earth. We fight because those who burned it believe they can do it again. Preparations began. Orbital shipyards over Thalkir worked around the clock, manufacturing dreadnoughts, support frigates, and next-gen fighters. The Thalzine, despite their pacifist roots, volunteered in droves. Their engineers retrofitted old Terran relics with bioorganic augmentations, giving rise to hybrid warcraft that stunned even the most seasoned tacticians. Humanity's long-lost kin, awakened from the Resolute and other discovered cryopods, now stood as living bridges to a forgotten era. Some took up arms, others became strategists, trainers, or historians, ensuring the past was never again allowed to fade. The Vagran were not idle. Their fleets massed near the Nirvana Expanse, a strategic corridor that led into the spine of Terran-controlled territory. They knew the Vindicator would answer any incursion. They wanted it. The trap was set. A series of coordinated attacks erupted across Terran-aligned worlds. Colonies on the fringe burned. Communications hubs went dark. A refugee convoy from Turnax was ambushed, and its children were spaced as a message. The Dominion wanted blood, and they were willing to drench the stars with it. But they miscalculated. Admiral Rourke did not retaliate with rage. She responded with fury, sharpened by discipline. The Terran Union's fleets moved not as a scattered resistance, but as a single blade forged in betrayal. Strike groups hit back with surgical precision. Vagran outposts, once thought unassailable, were reduced to embers. Captains who had once ordered the orbital bombardment of human worlds were hunted and tried for crimes against sentience. And in every battle, human and Thalzin forces moved like they shared one soul. Then came the turning point. Intel intercepted from a captured Dominion warlord revealed a far more insidious plan. The Vagran, in collusion with a faction within the Union itself, had begun constructing a planet killer. Codenamed Ashfall, it was a dread device built to eradicate Thalkir and serve as a final warning to the galaxy. Submit or be annihilated. The location was buried in the Nirvana Expanse. Alara Rourke gathered her war council. The mood was grim, but resolute. "We strike now," she said, "or we lose everything we've built." All available fleets were summoned. Allies answered the call. The Kestari brought their solar flare ships. The Grelk sent nanite swarms, and even the silent Olamari dispatched their spectral war dragons. The battle for the Nirvana Expanse became the largest engagement since the EI Purge of Soul. The Vindicator led the charge, its new armor blazing with quantum reactive plating. Admiral Rourke coordinated multi-species task forces like an orchestra of vengeance. Every formation, every movement, was a note in a symphony of justice. As they reached the ashfall site, the scale of the weapon stunned even the most hardened. Warriors. A construct the size of a small moon bristled with energy cannons and death spirals. Vagrant fleet clusters formed concentric rings of defense, and then the stars erupted. The Union had betrayed its own neutrality. A second fleet emerged from folded space, Union dreadnoughts bearing the same insignia that had once offered peace. But this time they fired not in defense, but in suppression. The Terran Union was surrounded, but they were not broken. Alara issued one command. All wings, full release. Show them what forgotten means. What followed would be remembered for centuries. Hybrid Terran-Thalzean strike teams punched through fleet lines. Grelk nanites devoured hulls. Olamari war dragons phased through shields and breathed neutron storms. The Kastari unleashed solar spears that pierced dreadnoughts, and aboard the Vindicator, Alara Rourke guided it directly into the heart of Ashfall. Boarding pods launched. Fire and steel met crystal and bile. The internal corridors of the weapon became trenches of slaughter. Alara, leading the final charge, reached the core. She placed the beacon, a fusion of Terran nuclear tech and Thalzean root code, and uttered her final words. For Earth. For every child silenced. For the stars that watched and wept. The fleet withdrew as the core detonated. Ashfall erupted in a light that rivaled novas. The battle ended. The war fractured. The Union fell into chaos. The Vegran fled. And from the wreckage, the Terran Union stood unchallenged. They were no longer the forgotten. They were the fire reborn. Embers of rebellion. The ashes of Ashfall still glowed in the darkness of space, a dead monument to a failed apocalypse. The Terran Union of Free Systems had delivered its message with finality. No more submission, no more silence. The Union of Sea. Core civilizations, fractured and disgraced, struggled to hold together the remnants of its authority. But the galaxy was not yet at peace. In the aftermath, the once hidden voices of rebellion began to rise from the shadows. On worlds enslaved or forgotten by the dominant powers, embers stirred in the dust of old dreams. Humanity's return had ignited something deeper than vengeance. Hope. The Terran Union, now seated in orbit above Thalkir, sent envoys across the stars, not as conquerors but as kindlers of revolt. From the deep jungles of Inshari Prime to the glacial vaults of Velnar Station, word of the Ashfall victory spread, carried by digital whispers, rogue traders, and even songs. Admiral Alara Rourke watched it unfold from her command center aboard the Vindicator, her face a mask of calm etched with quiet grief. So many lives lost to secure a future that still teetered on a knife's edge. We broke their weapon, she said to her inner circle, but not their will. The Vagran will regroup, and the Union, it has deeper rot than we thought. Her intelligence, Chief Leirenzow nodded grimly. Multiple splinter factions are rising from the Union's remains. Some seek peace, others, a reckoning of their own. One such faction emerged from the heart of the Union's bureaucratic caste, a cabal known only as the Curators. Cloaked in secrecy, they operated AI-driven black fleets and wielded technology from before the Purge. They had always seen the Vegran as a useful weapon. Now they saw humanity as a threat to their control. Their agents infiltrated border worlds, turning fledgling uprisings into slaughterhouses. They framed Terran envoys for acts of terrorism, poisoning the fragile trust humanity had begun to rebuild. A trap was sprung on the diplomatic world of Helivan. An envoy ship was destroyed mid-docking. Thousands perished. Evidence pointed to the Terran Union. The galaxy reeled. Alara Rourke, refusing to surrender the moral high ground, dispatched an investigative fleet led by Captain Jorn Dale, a hybrid, veteran born of Terran and Thalzean descent. His orders: expose the truth or die trying. On Helivan, Dial uncovered traces of curator tech, molecular residue of AI weapons, sensor ghosts matching long-dead signal trees. It was a ghost war. The real enemy didn't show its face. It rewrote it. Back aboard the Vindicator, Rourke convened her war council. "We're not just fighting tyrants now," she said. "We're fighting myth, and we must burn it down." The council approved Operation Stormwake, a full-scale network infiltration into curator-held space. Specialist crews, including the elusive hacker, collective called Nullwake, embedded quantum infiltrators into pre-Union infrastructure grids. The Terran Union began using data as a weapon, turning the curator's surveillance state against them. Each node they collapsed brought more defectors. Whole systems turned. Whispers of a second rebellion, this time from within the Union itself, grew, louder. In a final gambit, the curators launched a psychic disruption array known as the Mirror Spire, designed to fracture interspecies alliances through synthetic hallucinations and empathy overload. Alara and her science officer, Dr. Anisha Khoury, devised a countermeasure, a neural harmonizer integrated into a new ship class. The Harmony, Lance. Built from Terran intuition and Thalzian biotelemetry, it projected unity instead of fear. The Lance led a fleet into the heart of the Mirror Spire. What followed was less a battle and more a battle of minds. Crew members experienced memories not their own. Rage swelled. Tears were shed. But through the harmonizer, they held Alara herself, entered the spire aboard the Vindicator, wielding the harmonizer like a sword. "We remember who we are," she said, her voice echoing across every comm line. "And we remember why we fight." The Mirror Spire imploded, folding inward like a dying thought. The curator's hold fractured. Their fleets, leaderless and confused, fell into disarray. In the aftermath, with many of the Union's old chains shattered, a new council formed among the free worlds. But the Vindicator did not return to port. Alara looked to the stars beyond, to a signal, weak, ancient, still pulsing from the void beyond known space. Earth had spoken, and the last part of the journey had just begun. The stars whispered a name long thought lost: Earth. For decades, humanity believed their homeworld had been reduced to a lifeless husk after the purge. The orbital firestorms, the planetary glassing, the final betrayal by the galactic powers, all pointed to extinction. But now a signal pulsed faintly from the edge of known space. Old Terran code. A heartbeat from the grave. Aboard the Vindicator, Admiral Alara Rourke stared at the recovered waveform. The harmonics matched Earth's. Long-defunct distress protocol, no question, it was authentic. Someone or something was alive. "It could be a trap," warned Jorn Dial, her second-in-command. "Maybe," Rourke replied. "But we owe it to every soul who died believing Earth was gone to find out." A new mission was declared. A task force of humanity's most advanced vessels, joined by Thalzin biotech scouts, Kestari flare riders, and remnants of the liberated worlds, was formed. Not for war, not for vengeance, for home. They called the expedition Odyssey Prime. Crossing the Reach, the unexplored void past vagrant space, was perilous. Stars here burned wrong, twisted by gravitational anomalies. Planets were swallowed whole by rogue singularities. What little chart data existed came from pre-Union explorers and was riddled with caution. Along the way, they found wreckage, Terran vessels, ancient, broken, but unmistakably of Earth, as if a remnant fleet had once tried to return and vanished in the dark. The signal grew stronger. Every decoded pulse revealed more. Fragments of human speech, fragments of desperate hope. "This is Homebound Relay 7. We survived. The Veil." What was the Veil? Dr. Anisha Khoury led an analysis. The Veil was not metaphor. It was a phenomenon, a cloaking event possibly caused by quantum entanglement with the black nebulae. In short, Earth had been hidden. On purpose, but by whom? Then they found the Wardens. Machines. Sentient. Shaped like Terran warframes, but aged beyond current tech. They bore Earth markings but hailed the continuum of Eden. "You have trespassed on Sol sovereignty," one declared. Alara stepped forward. "I am Terran. I was born of Earth. I seek home. There was silence. Then, prove it. She was taken aboard one of the Warden arcs. What she saw changed everything. A hidden Earth, cloaked in a quantum envelope, verdant and untouched. Atmospheric restoration. Biodiversity beyond recovery protocols. A living planet, but it was not uninhabited. There were survivors, descendants of those left behind, raised by AI tutors, hidden from the galaxy. They called themselves the Echoes of soul they had rebuilt. We remember the fires from orbit, said the Elder of Eden, a matriarch named Kayla Vire. We remember the silence that followed, and we remember you, the ones who left. Ilara knelt. We thought you were dead. We came back to mourn. We found a miracle. Not all welcomed them. Some Echoes saw the Terran Union as deserters, exiles who abandoned their roots. Tensions brewed. But Earth was at risk again. The Curator remnants, scattered by the mirror spires. Fall had found the signal too. A massive AI dreadnought known as Nihil Crown was on approach. It sought to erase Earth for good this time. Echoes and Union forces had a choice: divide or stand together. Kayla Vire and Ilara Rourke addressed both peoples. Our scars may differ, Kayla said, but our blood is shared. Earth was never a place, Ilara added. It was the will to rise again. The United Defense formed in Earth's upper orbit. Wardens activated old planetary defense systems. Harmony lances and flare ships took formation. Echoes launched biomechanical interceptors with minds of their own. Then the Nihil Crown arrived, a ship that blotted stars. Its presence distorted gravity. It transmitted a single phrase: termination of anomaly Earth. The battle was apocalyptic. Gravity. Bombs, quantum mines, psychic disruptors. The Crown turned hope to despair with every pulse, but the Echoes fought like legends. The Wardens sang through code. Ilara guided the Vindicator into the Crown's heart, deploying the last of the harmonizer tech. The Crown faltered. Kayla Vire, aboard an Echo pod, delivered the killing blow, a burst of pure Terran DNA encoded in living code, unassimilable and viral to machine minds. The Crown shattered. Earth lived. In the aftermath, a new banner was raised, not of conquest or rebellion, but unity. The Sol Accord, humanity, Echoes, Wardens, and allies bound together in a pact. The stars would never again dictate Earth's fate. They would explore not as prey but as equals, as torchbearers of resilience. And in every system, the name of Earth was spoken once more with reverence. They had returned. They were home. And the stars would never forget them again. Years after the Battle of the Crown, the Sol Accord stood as a beacon of unity and defiance across the stars. Earth had been reborn. The Echoes of Sol integrated with the Union, and their combined technologies sparked a renaissance of science, exploration, and culture. The galaxy watched, wary and fascinated, as the species once nearly wiped from history now lit the way forward. But peace, like memory, is fragile. From the edges of the Sagittarius expanse came whispers of something older than the Curators. Before the Galactic Compact, before recorded time, the Echoes called them the Silence. They were not a species. They were a pattern, a network that moved through collapsed civilizations, feeding on entropy. Every time a culture peaked, the Silence came and reset it. No diplomacy, no warning, no mercy. They were the final answer to the question of unchecked evolution. And now they had noticed Earth. It began with black stars. Not black holes, but stars whose light was consumed from within. Systems that stopped transmitting. Colonies that turned to ash without war, without resistance. The only sign, a strange resonance buried in the debris. A whisper that said, "You have gone too far." Admiral Rourke, now Supreme Strategist of the Accord, convened the Council in the Celestial Bastion, orbiting Ganymede. The leaders of the Echoes Union, Kistari, Thalzine, and even Warden AI attended. Kayla Vire stood at her side, her once gray braids now silver-white, a symbol of longevity and experience. "We may have reclaimed Earth," Kayla said, "but now we must defend existence itself." To fight a myth, they had to become one. Project Nox was launched, an alliance to design a weapon that could counter the silence. Not just in force, but in information. The silence erased history, rewrote genomes, corrupted memories. Humanity's weapon would be more than firepower, it would be remembrance. They built the Aegis of Memory, a sentient starship, encoded with the genetic memories of every Earthborn species, armed with chronostabilizers and temporal lattice warheads. It could remember what the silence erased. They did not know if it would be enough. The silence arrived at the edge of Sol space as geometry gone wrong, fractal ships that unfolded into higher dimensions, logic-defying drones that devoured thoughts, as easily as atoms. They moved without sound, without heat. Their goal was total reset. The Battle of Neptune was the first engagement. Thousands of minds were lost to the silence's mimetic waveform, but the Aegis pushed back. Its memory pulse repelled the attack long enough for survivors to retreat. Kayla led the diplomatic initiative to contact the silence directly. Using Warden code, Echo Songcraft, and Terran linguistic roots, they created a bridge. One silence fragment responded. It spoke not in words, but symbols. It showed Earth collapsing in 1,000 futures. "You are the flaw," it said. But the Aegis replied, "We are the choice." It was war. Ilara Rourke led the final charge with the combined fleet. They activated the lattice gate above Mercury, allowing one final push into the heart of the silence's dimension, an impossible plane of quantum storms and collapsed time. One by one, the fleet faltered. But the Aegis, piloted by Kayla Vire herself, sacrificed its form to plant the core of memory into the silence's dimension. It sang every name of the fallen, every forgotten moment of Earth's history, every human who had ever lived. The silence recoiled. For the first time in recorded cosmic memory, it hesitated. Then it withdrew. No message, no negotiation, just absence. In the silence that followed, Earth endured. Kayla Vire was never found, but her name became part of every starship's wake. Every newborn on Earth bore her mark. She was legend now etched into time. Admiral Ilara Rourke stood before the Sol Accord, older, wearier, but proud. The galaxy once tried to end us, then tried to forget us. But we remember. We forge our own fire, and the stars will burn in our name. And so humanity marched on. No longer the forgotten, no longer the prey. They had faced gods and remained human.